Why is teaching math so important? And how can teaching maths like a language be key to unlocking its beauty and narrative power? What does this have to do with the world of investing? Let's find out next. I'm Aoife Devitt, and welcome to the 50Faces Podcast, a podcast committed to revealing the richness and diversity of the world of investment by focusing on its people and their stories. I'm joined today by Sally Bridgeland, who needs no introduction in London institutional investing circles. Following a long career as an actuary, investment consultant and investor, culminating in a role of CEO of BP Pension Trustees for the £19 billion BP Pension Fund, she has pivoted to an extensive portfolio career. Since 2014, she has held roles at Nesta, USS, Lloyds Banking Group, Avida International, RAF Central Fund, Nesta, the Nuclear Liabilities Fund, the Local Pensions Partnership, Impax Asset Management, and Royal London. Her portfolio is a very full one, but she still finds the time to commit to her passion for education and mathematics through the Royal Society and Loughborough University, and is Honorary Group Captain in the Royal Air Force No. 601 Squadron. Welcome, Sally. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks very much.
Let's talk about your journey into investment. Where did it start, and did it take any surprising turns along the way?
So I think my first exposure was as a member of an investment club. My cousin, as soon as I'd qualified as an actuary, he invited me to join an investment club, which had been set up by some school friends of his. And before then, I don't think I'd hadn't had any money to invest, let alone thinking about investing in different stocks and shares. So it was a real exposure to the basics, a bottom-up sort of stockbroker style investing. But in the world of actuarial studies, you're looking at investment in terms of risk and the liabilities. And it was quite a while before my career took me into the land of investment, really, because of the work that I was doing in technology change and project management and thinking about how we use data in the mid-1990s when we suddenly had a different kind of power available to us to process information. So that was a bit of a surprise. I got sucked into the world of investment consulting. Having thought I was just doing a project there for a year or a year and a half, I ended up being in the investment consulting practice for 9 years and headed up the investment research, the quantitative and the manager research aspects, as well as thinking about the business as a whole. And then from there, having had both the experience with the liabilities side and the administration side of pensions and the investment side, 20 years into my career when I was approached about becoming the chief executive of the BP Pension Fund, I had both sides of the coin available to me, those different skills, which meant that I was ideally suited to that role, and the oversight of a big in-house investment team, which drew me further into the details and the operational side of investment. And now I enjoy thinking about both the strategic aspects and the operational aspects in my roles. I chair the Audit and Risk Committee at Impax Asset Management, and at Royal London I'm on the With Profits Committee. So it's really thinking about the right strategies, the investment strategies and levels of risk that you need to be taking to give the assurances to the ongoing customers.
And I'm sure in many of the institutions you work with, they have a charter of investment beliefs. If you were to look at your own investment beliefs, are there any kind of guiding beliefs that you've developed from maybe your background as an actuary and investment consultant that you brought to bear first as an investor and now as a member of investment committees and advisor?
Yes, I think the time horizon is everything. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean just thinking about how long you measure investment performance on. It means you have to be able to imagine the world at the end of your time horizon and its path along the way, and what will have been the good things to have invested in along the way. And probably the most striking example of that is how we're now thinking about climate change. I'm a bit of an environmentalist. I've ridden a bike and certainly didn't have a car in most of my career, and it's taken a surprising long time for things, carbon and other aspects around climate change risks, to become risks that are actually borne by individual companies, rather than being externalities, things that they didn't have to worry about so much. So if we thought about those investments then in the way that we think about them now, how would we have made different choices, and how potentially would we have influenced the world? So I'm always trying to think a long term, and what will be the factors, what will be the risks that we're exposed to just because of the demographic and social changes that we're likely to experience. So I guess that's a bit of the actuary coming at it in terms of the demographics, thinking about, well, what really matters to people and to society, and what should we be investing in to help make that world a less risky place. That's the most important thing. I think I do fundamentally believe in the importance of active management, the belief that we don't have perfect information, and if you can find particularly a thematic way of approaching the world that is different from just relying on short-term data flows, that you will have an advantage.
And I'm sure many investors develop their investment beliefs through learning from mistakes or from setbacks or challenges. And certainly with a career as long as yours, you will have worked through many different economic cycles, through some market downturns. Have there been any particular, whether it be setbacks, challenges, or even mistakes that you made that really were formative because you learned from them?
Yeah, so I think there are two that I can think of. And one is, and this is less of a setback. It was more just good timing and realizing it was good timing. So I happened to be employed at BP, and my first quantity of shares that I was granted as part of my own share scheme, they matured, they vested. I set up a custody account, and by the time all that process had happened, I sold some shares, and the day after, the Gulf of Mexico tragedy happened and the shares pretty much halved in value. That underlined to me the importance of luck. While I was very relieved to have been on the right side of that, when you get close to those bad mistakes or moments of misfortune, it makes you realize the role of luck in the process. I think the other learning experience is being responsible for a fund when you go through a market downturn. So again, the BP Pension Fund was mostly invested in equities, and we had in 2008, when we had the global financial crisis, I remember sitting there thinking, well, what on earth else am I supposed to do with nearly £20 billion worth of pounds? Should I just, put them in cash and shove them under the mattress somewhere? What else are you supposed to do as a trustee other than keep calm, carry on? So I think that's the opportunities that come after a market downturn are the big learnings that come from the market downturn, and keeping your calm and keeping cool is really important in those kinds of situations, when particularly when there are other stakeholders who might be very anxious or have maybe got different timeframes and are worried about what happens this year or this quarter, then keeping that longer term perspective is really important.
And now in your current portfolio career, you hold a number of chair and committee roles. I would imagine you've been extremely busy over recent weeks and months, as some of these committees have increased their frequency. They probably all moved to Zoom, but that doesn't decrease the intensity, certainly. How do you approach these different roles? What do you try to bring to the table? And in particular, I'd love to know what you bring to the chair roles and what makes a successful chair in your view.
So I think I'm blessed with a real range of experience, and the role that I played in my consultancy career with the work in technology and my passion from my personal life for flexible working means that from the operational side of things, I'm comfortable with the way that we're working now. In a way, it suits that. It's a slight introvert in me, I think, and the technological enthusiast, that means that I'm quite happy working in the way that we're working right now. But there's nothing to beat the importance of relationships, and I think Zoom and Teams make that different. I don't think it's better. I don't think it's worse. It just means you probably have to think about it in a different way, have a different kind of battle rhythm to make sure that you've got that relationship right. That, for a non-executive, I think is really important. So whether you're a chair or just on a committee, it's a very, very part-time role. So you have to make the most of the touch points that you have. And if you're not fluent enough in the subject matter, it's really important to get the right kind of briefings outside the meetings. And what I'm finding at the moment is people are being taking advantage of the technology and the easier logistics of setting up meetings to do more briefing sessions on technical subjects, to have more one-to-one catch-ups, which I think is improving the quality of some of those relationships. In terms of what makes a good member of a committee is it's a bit of a yin and yang thing. Whatever the executive or management are good at, the non-executive have to spot the gaps. Are there weaknesses? Are they playing to their strengths? But also, have they covered off the weaknesses? And in terms of being a good chairperson, it's really important to engage in the technicalities, the things that that management are enthusiastic and passionate about and skilled at, and develop a relationship that means that if there's anything that's worrying them, that they can talk to you about it honestly. I've been in situations and seen clients or whatever where people have been anxious about putting things in front of a board or committee, and therefore the board and committee have been making decisions not blind but partially sighted, and that's not helpful. You really want to have all of the issues on the table. So if there are operational consequences of making a decision, that you understand those when you make the decision, rather than making it purely on the investment grounds, for example. So what makes a good chairperson is really having done your homework with the team beforehand to flush out the issues that are worth discussing, and then making sure that they're aired and everybody around the table deploys their skills to help solve any issues and add their wisdom and experience.
And I'm sure you've worked with some memorable people across your career. Were there any key people who had an influence on you? In what way? And maybe any piece of advice that you received that made an impact on how you see the world?
I think it goes back further than my working career, actually, to school and teachers. Two that I would single out. One was I come from very humble beginnings, and I was at my state primary school, and it was the headmaster there who noticed that there was a little girl who was really rather good at maths, and told my parents that I was really rather good at maths and I should go to a school where they could really nurture that, particularly at a time when women were not generally, or girls were not generally recognised as being good at maths. So he was really great at saying, just because you're a round peg in a square hole doesn't mean you should try and square yourself off. Be yourself, play to your strengths, and make the most out of that. You know, if I look at the various forks in the road in my life, that was probably the most important. And then when I got to school, so in the sixth form, when I was doing maths and further maths, my teacher had come from a school where maths was taught in the languages department, and that really appeals to me. The sort of the beauty of maths, the art in maths, rather than just working out the numbers. And that, I think, has helped me understand how we think about language, how we use language when we're using English and when we're explaining maths and the numbers and the graphics as well. So that was really influential in terms of a lot of my work, I think, has been about not just doing the numbers, but making sure the numbers are the right numbers and useful numbers, and I've got a purpose to them and explain them. And I think I really do trace that right back to the way that I was taught maths at school.
That's really interesting, and it's a great segue to my next question, which was around your ongoing passion for education in the area of maths and some of the involvement you have both with the Royal Society and Loughborough University. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what changes do you see being made in this area currently?
Yeah, so what's really interesting right now, what's really interesting is how home learning and different ways of teaching are opening up. And one of the challenges in maths education comes at primary school, where you don't necessarily have the primary school teachers tend not to be from a maths background. Sweeping generalization, but if somebody's good at maths and they go into education, they tend to become a maths teacher in a secondary school or above rather than the primary school teacher. So there doesn't tend to be a great confidence around maths. So just like in my state primary school, where I was asking lots of awkward questions of my teacher about maths, he probably wasn't necessarily up to the job and wasn't particularly passionate about maths. And that confidence in maths really affects how people interact with numbers, with their finances, with the world of investment, and all of those things which are so important to how people's lives pan out and their confidence generally. So both in the Royal Society's Advisory Committee on Maths Education, but particularly at the Centre for Mathematical Cognition, which was set up last year, they're looking at how we can learn from psychology in how we teach maths, and introducing potentially new methods of teaching, which are all about building confidence and helping parents be confident too, and have different kinds of attitudes. There are big difference in attitudes towards maths and sciences between boys and girls, and also in ethnic minorities tend to be discouraged or less confident about the STEM subjects. And so the root cause of getting the gender and ethnic diversity in our workforce has to be about helping them right back at schools not lose confidence in something that is so important.
It's so interesting. And I think at this time, as you mentioned, this is perhaps a unique opportunity because there is this forced collaboration between parents and students to work together on math. It may be a trial for the parents. They may not have the time, but they have to do it because they are essentially now collaborating in their children's education. And for math, it's interesting. My mother also was a math teacher, but one thing I've seen with my son who's 9 and on the autism spectrum is sometimes with math, it's about seeing the way in to a child's brain for it. It may not be, as is often today, translating math into practical terms, giving practical day-to-day examples, graphics. For my son, that doesn't work for him. He sees the numbers, his computation ability is outstanding. But if you try to give him this in a word problem, it probably won't make much sense. But if you give him a long division, he's happy. So I think, it's about finding the way in, as you mentioned, and that psychology aspect is so interesting. I hope you share more of your findings on that with us, because there really is, there is no time to waste.
No, and my personal experience of homeschooling during lockdown is the only exam that my son was up for this summer with GCSE maths. So I've had very much a personal experience. He's dyslexic. His memory isn't very good, but conceptually and visually and in terms of shapes, he's outstanding. And he understands fractions. He loves fractions. So what he was saying to me was, if I just read the PowerPoints that they sent me to revise for these tests, there's 5 timed tests that you have to complete, then I either understand it or I don't. He said, Mum, you know the bits that I understand and don't understand. And you also know, again, it's the way of joining the dots between some of the concepts, which in maths, there are a few high-level concepts, which once you've got those, you can work everything else out. It helps him find the way and find the confidence. The thing that made me most happy was after the last test he did, he said, oh, well, that was easier than I thought it was going to be. And I thought, well, if that's the final bit of formal maths that you do, and it's easier than you thought it was going to be, then that is big job done as far as I'm concerned, because you go away thinking, I can do this, I can nail this. And so few people have that experience, apart from the people who kind of were good at it anyway, but good at it in a very particular way, rather than necessarily the way that it's taught.
Exactly. And I think for many students, it's just a question of time. Having more time on the concepts actually allows them to crack it. And I think, unfortunately, in school, time is rushed. Whereas now, perhaps, as we're all at home, there's perhaps a little bit more time. Not for everyone, but perhaps. So just moving on to the world of investment, which you're in now and have been in for many years, what is it that you like most? Obviously, besides the numbers, I'm sure the numbers are part of it, but what is it that you like about the investment world?
I like the fact that a lot of it is about telling stories, understanding the story of the future for a particular company, for a particular market. And I'm a great sucker for a story. Every time I go away from an enthusiastic presentation, I think, oh yeah, that sounds right. And then you'll go to another one, and it'll be completely different. And then you have that interesting challenge of, how do I put this together in my world to make a decision about this? So it's very complex. There are no right answers. And in terms of decision making, there's an awful lot of information and an awful lot of assumptions and conjecture. So it's that combination that I find really attractive and interesting. And you also get some phenomenally interesting characters. Some egos, some geeks. They're all there at the extremes in the world of investment. So yes, it's a fascinating world.
It's so true. And I think also you have to be a critical thinker in the world of investment too. You can't just accept every story that has been spun in front of you. If you don't sort of assess it critically and ask questions and poke holes, you're probably not doing your job. So it forces you to be an active, engaged participant as well.
Yeah, and an interesting bit of research that through the Worshipful Company of Actuaries we sponsored on maths education is, one of the things that mathematicians are better at if they've gone through a sort of post-16 education is spotting the non sequiturs in a story. They are more critical naturally, because they know that just because one thing is true doesn't mean that something else is true, and they can spot the gaps in the logic. So I think that's something that I kind of bring to bear, and I'll have my little skeptical points that I'm writing down every time someone's telling a story, even though I might admire the way they tell it. But yes, it is. You do need that critical hat too.
And it's not just in our work lives, it's on our daily lives. I think especially now during the COVID crisis, when we're being bombarded with statistics and data, and not all of it being correctly interpreted, you could argue, and certainly sensationalized and cherry picked. So I think it's a skill that's particularly needed today as well. Very
much so. And I was lucky to work with Sir David Spiegelhalter at the Advisory Committee on Maths Education until last year, when he's moved on. But the work that he's been doing with the on the Winton website with Cambridge University, where he's debunking some of the stats and really trying to make sense of it. I think that kind of stuff is really helpful. Some of the ways that certainly the politicians have been talking about science and maths has certainly made me weep about the quality of STEM education in this country, and certainly around the cabinet.
Well, hopefully, thanks to you, there will be hope for the next generation. Just in terms of a final few questions, is there any creed or motto that you live by?
I do like the whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're probably right. There have been times when, certainly when I joined BP, where I sort of reassured myself in the network of people that I knew in the industry that actually this was a tough job, but I was probably as well equipped to do it as anybody else. And that gave me some fortitude facing the differences of starting at a new organisation with a very different culture, having been with the same growing organisation for 20 years.
And looking back now, as you at this stage in your career, your younger self, would you have any advice for your younger self? Is there anything you wish you knew then that you know now?
I think the the most important thing is about playing to your strengths. When I was at school, you were always encouraged to be an all-rounder, and I was a good all-rounder. I think in the line of in the world of business, you do tend to end up working harder on some of the things that you're weaker at, whereas actually I think you get most satisfaction out of thinking about the things that you're good at, that you're passionate about, and that somebody's willing to pay you to do a job for. It's a bit like Jim Collins' good to great on the hedgehog concept for companies. I think you should apply that on an individual basis, and don't worry so much about the routes that you take. Some of the things that I did in my consulting career, because I was doing non-chargeable work and project work, it wasn't career enhancing within that organisation. But in terms of the breadth of the opportunities and the skills that I've learned, looking back, it was absolutely the right thing for me to do, and I wouldn't have done it any other way.
That's a very nice piece of advice there, I think. So thank you, Sally. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today, and thank you for sharing your insights with us.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
I'm Aoife Devitt. Thank you for listening to the 50 Faces podcast. If you liked what you heard and would like to tune in to hear more inspiring investors and their personal journeys, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as investment advice, and all views are personal and should not be attributed to the organisations and affiliations of the host or any guest.